Good evening, and welcome to the January 13th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Perez, seconded by Bankin. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Director Shields Cook, would you please read the purpose statement?
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you very much. And the first item tonight is the public hearing for the 2020-2021 district calendar. I will go ahead and open that public hearing if anyone would like to come up and speak in regards to the district calendar.
Amy Edwards, 1204 Arizona Ave. This is just a clerical thing after I was looking through it. It doesn't have a date for a return when classes resume. So I'm sure if we asked our kids, they would be like, winter break is till June or something. But it doesn't, I would guess January 4th is what is to be planned, but it doesn't indicate that as written on the right-hand side. It just gives us the dismissal for early and then the break, but it doesn't say when class resumes. So that would be my only thing that I observed.
Yep, thank you very much. And we will make sure staff makes a note of that so our students know when they get to return in 2021 from winter break. So thank you for calling that to our attention. Any other comments during the public hearing on the district calendar? Did we receive any comments? All right, I will go ahead and close the public hearing, and we will go ahead and move on to our information discussion items. But I will first read our statement regarding public comments, which follow each of our discussion items, as well as our public forum. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And our first discussion item is Title III mini grants from Heartland Area Education Agency. And I believe Dr. Chad Dumas is here to discuss it with us.
Yes. So Shaylee Santiago, in collaboration with our EL staff, has written these 3 mini grants, $5,000 each, and we're very excited that all 3 of them were accepted by the ADA. And so,
Maybe just hold it up.
there we go.
There you go.
Okay. There's this echo in the room, so it's
Yes,
hard
you
to
do.
tell whether or not it's the speakers or the acoustics. So Shaylee Santiago wrote these 3 mini grants through the AEA, and we received all of them. Of course, she was working in partnership with the English learning staff, and we're just very excited about receipt of all 3 of these pending your approval, and the information on those is provided in there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about these 3 grants.
Any questions? All right. Thank you very much. Are there any comments from the public on the Title III mini grants from Heartland AEA? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the board communication strategy, which is I am on the docket for that. But for those of us that were had the opportunity to be a part of the election process this fall, I think one of the things, at least from my experience, and I think Director Bierbaum would also share it, is one of the themes that we heard was some communication, and in terms of clarification of what's the board working on, what are you working towards, what are those key things that are coming out of the board meetings. So when we were at our IASB conference, and I talked about this a little bit at our last work session, when we were at the IASB conference, we went to a session on that one of the school districts in Southwest Iowa and looked at some of the strategies that they were using and to improve the messaging they were providing to their public following their meetings. Granted, we are fortunate that all of our meetings are videotaped, and we certainly have a communications director that is really helpful in trying to get some information out. But what is the clarity that we want to provide as a board? That was some of what we were seeking when we went to this session. And one of the strategies suggested there was at the end of the meeting, this board, the way they did it, I think we could tweak, but they each identified a key takeaway from the meeting, and then they put together what were those, they agreed upon what were those 3 key takeaways, or what were those 3 overarching ideas, not necessarily your opinions on those things, but these are the big 3 discussion items or points of interest that were brought up at the meeting. And so we had discussed entertaining this idea for our board at the end of the agenda to have a time when we all kind of put together or agree upon what are those key things that we want to make sure that our public is aware. So if they don't have the opportunity or the time to be able to watch our entire meeting, they can at least see what are those, some of those high points that we thought, and maybe if something catches their attention, then they can, go in and read the meeting minutes or look at the video. So wanted to throw that out there. I know we have a group of communication that are going to take a look at communication with staff, but I really felt like this is really board-centric, and wanted to get, if there's any thoughts on this from all of you. I think for me it would be provide an additional concise way that when I am out in the public, and if anyone's saying, we had a meeting, what were the the hot topics? Well, here's what the board identified as some of the hot things that important things that we talked about. So wanted to throw that out there and see if there's any thoughts from any of you on maybe some feedback on what that might look like here. Or if you want to add anything, because you were at the presentation with me.
I think the one thing I would add is they talked about a variety of purposes for this. One of them is just so we as a board are all in agreement on, hey, these are the big things we're taking on. Again, it's not saying we all agreed on what we did with them, just that this is what we've been going. And then that also makes it so, for example, the newspapers or other media or just people in the community then that are sharing what is the board doing, there's a kind of a consistent set of things. It makes it so we really are getting out some of those most important things. One of the examples they had, and we've had it too, is oftentimes you'll have a board meeting and you're addressing a couple of really important items, but maybe they went quickly or somebody didn't really catch what it was, and then the perception in the public is that the most important things were a couple other things. And they really missed, well, no, there were these other 2 things you really need to know about, and just helping to communicate that out. But yeah, it seemed like a good technique that we could consider doing and see how it goes and refine it. But really anything we can do, I think, to improve that communication out to the public from the board, I think would be helpful right now.
I agree. I think that it's great that we have an excellent communications director with the district. But I think a lot of the feedback I received during the election was talking about communication from the board. And I think it's important that we have something that's coming from the board that's not coming from the district, that we're communicating with the public.
Any other thoughts?
I have 2 thoughts. One, I guess the first one is a question, because I'm still just not really clear. I think certainly we do need to communicate better and more. And so what would it actually look like? Because based on what you said, so we would it be, some kind of post that just says, at this meeting, the board discussed Title III mini grants, board communication strategy, and board committee update? Like, what would it look like?
I guess how I envision it looking out like is at the end of our meeting, we would all identify what we believe those, so let's say that those were the top three things. So if it was Title III mini grants, maybe we pull from the board agenda form the paragraph that describes it, or we bring up some points that were made during it, whether it was during the presentation or it was from points that we all had made. But again, nothing that that we're trying to highlight, well, these were the different opinions on it, but helping people understand what are those topics of discussion. So I would say, potentially on tonight, if we're looking at one of our action items is to go to, we're doing considering the approval of the Mitchell Elementary additions and remodel for 2020. So if we believe that that's one of the top things, so putting in that and say, hey, Jerry, so this is one of the things we've identified as one of our key things, and here's the nuts and bolts that we're adding this many classrooms, this is what the time schedule will look like, so that people can get a almost like an executive summary of that topic. So, but those are the topics that we all kind of negotiate at the end of the meeting, what we would say would be those high-level things.
Thank you, that was helpful. I've heard you say a couple of times that it wouldn't necessarily include our opinions or the discussions, and I'm wondering if that's an area we could consider, because I think that's actually helpful. That's a way to communicate, because on some issues, there's just consensus, right? And on some issues, there are differences of opinion, and I think kind of informing if we're going to inform the community, I think it's helpful to let them know the board as a whole has consensus on this issue, even though the community might not, or that, these are the things that where there wasn't consensus, these are the things we're discussing, and maybe we missed something, right? So it's an opportunity to at least provide that feedback, just a quick summary of what the discussion was. Was there consensus? Were there differences? Where they were?
And I think that I would clarify that, yes, obviously on an action item, we want people to understand, well, okay, so at the end of tonight, well, yes, it was approved, unanimously on it, or it was a split vote, but here were some of the discussions. I think not getting into the he said, she said, but helping understand that the public understand we do have rich conversations here. So if we can provide an executive summary of that, I think that would be helpful. So enough so that if people desire to understand more about that discussion, they can then tap into our resources that we provide.
Yeah, that's part of what I'm thinking is like what we'll use it for and what it would really do, because there's much more opportunity for the community to participate in the discussion when the topic is at the discussion phase versus at the action item phase, right? We've already voted, and so it doesn't necessarily help them. And so I would just wonder if there is space to include some summary of whatever the conversation was, so that we can give people more opportunity to engage us.
And I think that's one of the opportunities for that is I don't think that it all needs to be action items. I actually would say maybe one of the, we don't have anything on here. Let's say we were a discussion item that was going to come at the next meeting for a vote. We could say the board was presented information. One of the key things we thought was the board was presented information on this. Here's some of the discussion took place, and we could put in there a motion will come at the January 27th meeting, because I agree it does provide then an opportunity if there is a desire for the public to be engaged in that process. So not just reporting on action items. So.
And also, my other point is, it's just a concern, really. And I guess I want to pick up on Director Shields' quick comment. I think one of the strengths of this board is that we try to stay in our role as board members, and we try, I feel, to really respect the boundaries between the board and the district. And so I'm wondering whether or not Eric is the right person to do this, given that he is the person, it's his job to be the communications director for the district, and so his job description wouldn't include board communications, right? And so I'm wondering about just kind of blurring those boundaries that I feel like we've always tried to really respect. And also, does that, if that's an extra duty, that's an equity issue. Is he going to get more money for this? Like, how is that going to work? I just wonder about the nuts and bolts of having someone in the district be working for the board.
we have a board secretary, sorry, Chris, but it could be a collaborative effort. It certainly could be. I mean, if it's coming from the board, I think Eric lends himself some skills when it comes to communicating things, but I certainly can understand in terms of the clarification of the roles. I think it is, but there are, I think that this would be a collaboration between the superintendent and probably the board secretary, board president and the board secretary, because we, similar to how we create the agendas together, but it's the topics are going to come from all of us. So I also want to be careful that whomever is given charge of it, that responsibility isn't placed, because if I'm creating the message, I want it to be a message from all of us. So maybe it's a message that is created, but you all can approve at the table, because we'd have to do it.
The example that we saw at ISB, what they did, and I'm not saying this is what this district should do, I don't think it'd work out well for us, but what they did is, at the board meeting, they came up with the 3 items, and then those ended up in the board minutes. And it just lined up that the superintendent, if I remember right, had a communication they tended to put out to the public a few days after the board meeting, just to say, this is what's up with the district, and this is what happened at the board meeting. And he included that, I think, as part of that communication. That's what I was led to believe.
I did email him, and he didn't indicate that. My question, based on kind of what he responded back with, would be, to me, it just looked like it was in the minutes. It wasn't a separate communication that I saw. And maybe it was, but he didn't share that. What he shared was the board meeting structure, how they decided on it, and it sounded like it just goes in the next board meeting minutes. These were the 3 key takeaways. So if he shared something, he didn't indicate that to me. My question would be, how is this information any different than what would be in the board minutes?
I think that's kind of the key, and one of the things that I know I've heard around the community is there are people in the community that read through the board minutes, watch all the meetings, but how do we proactively as a board communicate with the rest of the public that also wants to know what's going on? And I agree, this idea of what the delivery mechanism is, as far as who or how, is key. I mean, in one way, for example, we have the Ames Tribune that's going to write an article generally after each board meeting. One way this might actually work out is, I would guess that as they're writing that article, they're looking at the meeting minutes. They would then see, well, what the board thought was most important was these 3 items, and if that matches what they're thinking, or maybe it points out, wait a minute, I missed that one. Maybe it helps them to understand what our thoughts are. So maybe really it ends up in the minutes, and it simply influences how the meeting gets reported out, because we've made clear what we thought might be most important. Now, they might not say the same thing, and that's fine. I see what you're saying about Eric as an employee of the district. Is this something that they would do? At the same time, I mean, on the flip side, oftentimes we do things in the meetings, like, approve something for the high school, or get a program going, or start something up, that Eric does end up communicating out. So it might not necessarily be that the day after we just expect, well, Eric's going to push out a post on social media about the 3 things the board did. But again, it might influence him on the things he's already doing, that he is doing as an outcome of board actions that were taken. So if we have 3 actions that we've taken that we think are important, maybe he looks at those and like, oh, yeah, maybe the community would like to know about this one, and he's just doing that as part of his normal duties. I don't know. I mean, I would leave it to Superintendent Reisner about that. And I know we're going to hear more about that, maybe in a communication committee coming up, as far as what the district's communication plan is like and how that might relate to this.
I think just to be sure that I that I expressed the two concerns that I had. One, just the clarification between what is different from speaking about an item within the board minutes where we describe who said what and all of that. I'm not wanting to do additional work that's already there, I guess is my point. And so there's that piece. The second piece is I struggle with the concept of prioritizing what the board believes to be the most important items, only because I want to be really careful on that, because sometimes what you, I don't want to diminish what somebody else may feel. A staff member may come and present, and that's their whole job. That's what they do, and they value that and feel it's important. But then the board says, here were our 3 important things, and it doesn't make the cut. And so I just want to be really careful that there's a difference between 3 key takeaways and the verbiage that I hear the board using here tonight, which is the 3 most important items. Key takeaways are different to me than most important items. So just to be careful, we define that like differently maybe would be important, so that we're not diminishing the work of what our staff is doing and presenting and putting time and effort into.
And I really appreciate you sharing that, because it is the intention of this is not to prioritize the work of the district. It is for us as representatives of the community. I guess the way I see this, in reflecting on kind of what Sabrina had talked about, but just what are the 3 takeaways that I think that it's important that we do share a little bit more about. Not because it is more important than if we go through the list here and I pick the 3, it doesn't mean one is more important. It's just we want to make sure that we catch the larger audience with that item.
And
how's that?
That's much, and I'm not saying I'm saying
I
I
appreciate
heard that
though.
wording
Yep, I appreciate that.
used
Yeah.
tonight. What are the 3 most important things versus what are the 3 key takeaways? And so I think that there's a difference, and we want to be mindful of using the language of key takeaways.
So maybe it's 3 takeaways for community awareness rather than any other verbiage that maybe we've used unintentionally tonight.
Exactly, yep.
I'm just interested to know the logistics of it, because it says we all like amass those 3 key points for all of us, but there's 7 of us. So how would we determine what those 3 key takeaways are? How do we know?
So I wouldn't be tied to the number 3 in my mind, but it's what would be identified. You know, if we have a night where, well, we really think there's 4 or 5, but it would be through a discussion of what do we believe those key takeaways are that we want to highlight for everyone. So they held to the 3. In my discussion, when Alan and I were in the presentation, we didn't necessarily feel like you had to be held to the 3, because we are a group of 7, and we're a group of 7 that I think have some pretty dynamic conversations.
And that's a group of 5. That's a board
Right,
of 5 in a
absolutely.
very small district. So.
I also don't want to sugarcoat the issues. If there's an issue that we're kind of not agree on, or I don't want to kind of repackage the message that for what had happened on the discussion item. I don't want to repackage it and disregard some people's voices. So, and that's a concern to me.
So maybe what we can, do we want to, how about let's do this. Why don't you all give it some thought? Unless anybody, I don't want to silence anyone if anybody else has any other thoughts. Because this is a very vibrant conversation. I want everyone to give it some thought. We could try it a couple of meetings and see and say, well, that failed, we don't want to do that again, or try it and refine it, or not even pursue the idea.
I think one comment I'd make is kind of reflecting back to the beginning of Director Franzen said, this really came from effectively, we were actively thinking at ISB, what can we do to help improve board to community communication? And this looked like a mechanism that may be able to help with that. So I'd widen it even further. If anybody on the board has other ideas they think might help with that, let us know. At the same time, the other ones that we brainstormed, as we've seen, there are many issues involved, right? We know it's something we need to do, but finding a way to do it that works out is challenging. So, open to any discussion.
Thank you for the discussion on it. We appreciate you sharing some feedback and thoughts on it. So, are there any comments from the public on this? Come on up.
Angela Shaw, 5411 Tennessee Street. Two major points as you guys go through this discussion. Dr. Bankin started this with feedback. When I was in the forums, it was, we want to have two-way conversations with the board more. So if you're going to do these takeaways or what have you, what is that feedback mechanism that people who might not be here can actually do? The second point is, what is your means of disseminating? So if you're just doing social media, then you're only getting a little bit of parents that are actually liked your page and are getting the updates for it. So there are a lot more parents that are you going to send it home in backpacks so you get the most out of it? How are you going to really get this into the hands of the people that aren't diligent like us, that are here all the time, that read the minutes, but aren't on your social media page, do not read your emails? If the idea is to really get what is happening here, you need to think outside the box and not just use one mechanism. As well as we have a lot of diversity in languages and all of that, so making sure that you're knocking down any boundaries that might be present. Like today we just learned about mini grants for those that have English as a second language. Well, is that going to be communicated in multiple languages so people can see, ooh, we have new things that are going to benefit these families? So as you think about your whole communication plan, let's think about all of our families, the diversity that we have, the different languages we have, and make sure that the means that you're disseminating this information is going to be diverse.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? All right, we will go ahead and go on to the next item, board committee updates.
So we had a board committee meeting that I'm going through the minutes because it was quite a while ago for facilities. There's quite a bit of information in there, and some of the items are coming up later. A couple items to point out. There is a note here that the district's currently considering some pretty good gym upgrades that could occur based on the possibility of a potential private donor stepping forward. That could be interesting. Also, there was a discussion towards the end of the meeting related to the potential need for some sort of alternative school facility, or really just the general need of potential area for serving some students with needs that are a little bit different. Those discussions are continuing to happen, and I know we've all talked about those, and we'll come through other committees if there's anything that comes from that. And then, as we all know, there's the demographic study that will be upcoming. We had learned during the facilities committee meeting that they were ahead of schedule on that, and it looks like we're going to get the second phase of that sooner than we anticipating, which will be great for beginning those discussions even sooner.
Any other updates on board committees? I know that we had a committee meet prior to, I think Teaching and Learning maybe met this evening prior to our board. And others have some.
Teaching and Learning, yep, we met at 5:30, and it was mostly an organizational meeting, kind of, we came up with a rhythm for the meetings. We'll have them every month, and the next one, we set February 12th at 4:30, and we talked about some of the subjects we want to be we want to talk about, and mental health was one of the ones that came to the top. And I believe that's what we'll be addressing in the next few meetings.
Great.
And we'll have minutes as well.
Yep.
Yep, those are coming.
Just as a refresher, it was at our last meeting. It seems like such a long time ago, but it was at our last meeting that we got ourselves organized with our committees. So you will start to see more board committee reports and meeting times coming about, because we are now have our assignments, and thank you, JD. They are now on the screen so you can see. We reviewed their charter, we identified the directors that will be serving on those, and then we also had a brainstorming session during that work session on what are some of those, what were some different topics. It was just a real open brainstorming, not a limited list, but just to pass on to these different committees on thoughts from the entire board on topics that we think it might be helpful for those committees to pursue. And like I said, it is not a finite list, and it is not an assignment, but just some feedback from the rest of the board to those individual committees. So.
Oh, and I have another.
Yep.
I attended the county conference. No, not the county. The city. Yeah, the city. And basically, that it was a mini board. And basically, what that mini board does, it reviews the assessor's budget before it's presented to the city council. So we did that. And next meeting is Sabrina and I are in it. And next meeting is the 28th at 5:30, right before the board, the city council meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other comments from the public on our board committee update? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move to the public forum, and Joe Thompson is signed up first to speak.
Hi, thank you. My name is Joe Thompson. I live at 926 South Dakota Avenue. I have two children in the school district, a daughter that's a sophomore in the high school, a son who's a fifth grader at Edwards Elementary. Recently, within the last year or two especially, I've been thinking a lot about, based on my daughter's experiences, about the question of mental health, which was just mentioned conveniently. She has been struggling, I would say, with anxiety since the middle school. And it's gotten progressively worse and started to affect other aspects of her life. And so I've become more concerned with this as the years have gone on. I was curious about what may be happening within the district to address this question. As we all know, this is becoming more and more of an issue with our children. I was pleased to read the district purpose statement, as well as the priorities list that specifically mentioned this. It got me thinking about the question of what the district may be doing specifically to address this. I happen to be reading, I think, a recent issue of the Amazing, where there was a profile of Mrs. Muhammad, I believe was her name, that the high school has recently hired to help address this, and I was also very encouraged about that. What was concerning to me is that for my daughter in particular, and I can only assume that for other children and other parents as well, it's a resource that either may not be known about with all students, or they may not be utilizing it for a variety of reasons. Whether they're just not comfortable talking with someone like that resource within the high school, or otherwise. So my question is, although I'm pleased, obviously, that this is a topic of concern to the district, my question is, what else can we be doing? And I think as my time runs out, my question is, can we have a mental and emotional health program in our schools that's similar or on par to our physical education program?
Okay. Thank you very much for giving us your question, sharing your thoughts and your concerns with us. Yeah. Yep, I asked, sorry for the whispering, I asked Superintendent Reisner to just make a couple of comments, but then we can have some follow-up with you following the meeting.
Yes. The district is, as we're working on our MTSS model, which is the multi-tiered system of support model, one of the areas within that model is the social emotional learning curriculum. And so that is being reviewed right now. And our hope is to have something selected and ready to implement next year. One of the things that we too noticed was the increase in anxiety and some of those behaviors. And so we took our counselors out of the teaching rotation this year so that they were able to provide individual assistance to students. We also put some other structures in place to try and offer more support from adults at our buildings. We added social workers, so 2 social workers at our elementaries, and the position you're talking about is a social work position at the high school that was already in place, but we added 2 at our elementaries as well, knowing that we would be growing that model as well. But I think you're exactly right when you talk about that social emotional learning curriculum, and we're working with somebody that looks at the research behind that and the different pieces that go into that. So that is in the works, and hopefully we'll be ready to roll out in the fall of next year. And I don't know if...
Is that good?
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much. And there is, I know that our 2 executive directors are sitting over there that would be happy to maybe answer some questions following the meeting as well. So thank you for bringing us your concerns, Mr. Thompson. Next is Evan.
And just one quick thought, I'm so sorry. And also Dr. Jones, the
I'm
equity...
sorry.
He
Yes.
would be...
Any of those 3 sitting in the front row. Evan Lapolis.
My name is Evan Lapolis. I'm an Ames High School senior. I have lived in Ames pretty much my entire life. I am the 2019-2020 Student Council co-president. And I would just like to talk to you about block scheduling in the high school that was implemented this year. One of my main concerns with block scheduling is that it is really hurting our clubs at the high school. The past few years, we've had 4+ periods a week and a Wednesday late start, which all allowed opportunities for various clubs to meet. Now we are lucky to have 3+ periods a week, whether we have a shortened day every couple weeks or we just don't have school for teachers to have their conferences. I have had many conversations with different club leaders from the likes of DECA, Sacre, Teens Against Human Trafficking, and my student council, and we are all reporting very low numbers in club attendance this year because we are all competing for times to meet. And because most of the people who are in clubs like to be in multiple clubs and get involved, but it's hard when we don't have times to meet. And so just one of my questions I wanted to ask you was, how much do you care about club culture, and what opportunities are you willing to give to clubs? Also with block schedule, it is very hard with some classes, whether it be like, I know personally for me, like choir, band, math, it is very hard for students to concentrate during those 90 minutes. I have talked to many kids who just will skip periods during block days because they don't want to be in a class for 90 minutes that they don't find very interesting. Also, I have many friends who take college courses at Iowa State or DMAC and show up 30 minutes into a class because of a scheduling conflict. And it is very hard for them to catch up on that class if they are missing a third of that period. It also is hard for counselors to plan for if you have 3 different schedules on a regular week to work around those college classes, because they have to figure out when you're going where if you have these many different schedules. And if we have a shortened period on one of those weeks, then you have 4 different schedules you have to account for on a single week. I know Ames deeply cares about education, and I know this block schedule won't immediately be changed or anything, and it won't affect me personally as I'm a senior. These are just my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Evan, for sharing your concerns with us this evening. We appreciate it. Do you want me to have Jeff follow up? Sure. And Jeff Hawkins, our Executive Director, you don't need to address him now if you don't want, but maybe if there's some questions of his or some feedback, you can have a discussion. There's your point person, though. But thank you very much for coming and sharing your concerns this evening. All right, we'll go ahead and move to the consent items, and I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second?
It's moved by Bankin, seconded by Bierbaum.
Gifts to the district, BASF, Ames Lab. There's a number of gifts this time, so just sit back and relax. Iowa State University Women's Club Stitchery Group, Collegiate United Methodist Church, Central Iowa Board of Realtors, 3Gs, ISU Research Park, Culver's, Pure Lux, Scentsy, Paparazzi Jewelry, Tupperware Pop-Up, The Pumpkin Patch, Closed Cottage Boutique, Gingrich Amish Baskets, Inside Golf, The Cafe, Green Ash Farms, Norwex Independent Sales, Wild Birds Unlimited, Cookies, etc., Sense Cosmetics, Cafe DM, Taste Place, Fuji Japanese Steakhouse, Tropical Smoothie, Avon, Color Street, Cabin Coffee Company, Eat Well Sauces, Candles by Alley, and Quilted Craft Place.
Thank you. It's been moved by Bankin, seconded by Bierbaum to accept the consent items. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. First action item this evening is the 2020-21 district calendar.
We're bringing this from last meeting, correct?
Well, yes, because we had our public hearing this evening, so it was out, discussion item last meeting, but then yes.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll entertain a motion.
I move the board approve the 2020-21 district calendar as presented.
Second.
Moved by Bierbaum, seconded by Bankin. Discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Next item is the 2020-21 board meeting schedule, and this item was tabled at our last meeting. So we have a motion that we are considering. We are actually at the point that we are considering an amendment that was provided by Director Bierbaum to remove July 6th and August 3rd.
I withdraw my motion.
Your amendment?
My amendment, yes.
All right, we will go ahead and withdraw that amendment.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the school board calendar by removing the July 13th and August 24th meeting dates.
A second?
It's moved by Bankin on an amendment, seconded by Bierbaum, to remove the July 13th and August 24th meeting. Discussion. In case we haven't confused you, this is just the Robert's Rules way of getting back to getting our meeting calendar to the sync. So if you look at the dates that were provided in the packet, those are with this amendment, with these dates being removed. So just a point of clarification. Any questions or discussion? All right, so the amendment on the table is to withdraw July 13th and August 24th. Also, all of those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. We will entertain the original motion to pass the 2021 board meeting schedule. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. So what you see in front of you is the approved board meeting schedule for the 2020-21 board meeting schedule. And I do want to just highlight, and we will make sure that as we're advertising dates for meetings, that unless otherwise indicated, the first meeting date of each month will include a regular meeting at 5:30 with a work session immediately following. Second regular meeting will have a start time of 6:30. And again, we will make sure that we advertise those as much as we possibly can. Next item, the Dropout Prevention Funding Report. I'll entertain a motion.
I move the board approve the 2020-21 modified supplemental amount application for dropout prevention and the budget proposal as presented.
Second.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Kolten. Is there any discussion or questions for Jeff Hawkins? Do you maybe want to come up and just give us a little bit of a description of what we're voting on here? Thank you, Jeff.
Happy to do so. So as you may know, as a board, in order to access some modified supplemental funds available from the state that is correlated to our certified enrollment, we have to be willing as a board to commit a 25% match. Those funds being dedicated to serve our students that would be at risk of, I would say, push out or pull out. That's the language that would be used by the National Dropout Prevention Center. Is this working? Sounds like it is. Maybe not. Should be now? Okay. I thought it was working before. Okay. Would you like me to repeat that?
Sure.
Okay. I will try to be succinct. The state of Iowa provides for a modified supplemental amount of funding, in this case, slightly over $1.5 million that we can access as a district if you as a school board are willing to provide a 25% match, in this case slightly over $519,000. Those funds, if you will, should be dedicated to the services to ensure that students are not pushed or pulled out of our school. And again, so it's Dropout Prevention is the name of the funding stream from the state of Iowa. Included in your report is some statistics over the students that have been pushed or pulled out. Again, I'm using that language. That is the language that would be used by the National Dropout Prevention Center, that students are either pushed out or pulled out from school. There's a research paper on the 25 factors that influence that, but that's for another night maybe. In addition, there's information in the board agenda form about the number of students that have been served in recent years and are projected to be served next year. So essentially, what is being asked of the board tonight is to commit some general fund money in order to be able to access this modified supplemental amount from the state. Is that said correctly, Chris?
So what the program does is it approves modified allowable growth, and then the funding source is local property taxes. So the $1.5 million would be levied as property taxes because the application gives us the spending authority to do that, and then the match is from our regular program dollars.
Thank you, I appreciate the clarification.
Any questions or comments as part of a discussion? All right, we have a motion on the table, moved by Perez, seconded by Kolten, to approve the modified supplemental amount application. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Next item is the Mitchell Elementary additions and remodel.
I move the board approve the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated total cost of the Mitchell Elementary additions and remodel 2020, and set the date of public hearing on February 24th, 2020.
Second.
Moved by Bierbaum, seconded by Bankin. Discussion?
My only question is about where the deficit is coming, it will be coming from. Is this PEPAL or SAVE? Is there a reason why we are not sure which one?
It's not that we're not sure, it's we have an option of using either of those funding sources.
And we just don't know which one.
And if you remember, we have a vote on March 3rd to reapprove our revenue purpose statement. And if that is approved, which it should be, then it would be from SAVE.
Okay, perfect. That's what I need. Thank you.
Wait. So I'm looking at the project estimate, and it's close to $4 million. And what I recall, and I might be misremembering, but when we did the original bond for the high school, one of the things we added was an additional, I believe it was $5 million to renovate 3 elementary schools. And so $4 million of that $5 million is going to go to one school. Is that right?
Is it 4 million?
It's 3.9 million.
3.9 for project cost, yes. So we had $5 million that we approved for the bond, and then we also have allocated another $2 million out of SAFE that's already committed or budgeted for that.
For Mitchell or for all of them?
For all of them.
Okay.
So we're working to be able to close that gap. There's several reasons why the cost estimate is up. Part of it's the economy. And then we've got some escalation that's happened over the time since we voted too. So I do plan on being able to track the costs with this one and then be able to apply what we learned to the other projects too for Edwards and Meeker.
Is there any concern that we're going to have to reimagine the renovations we were thinking for the other 2 schools based on the funding we have, or do you feel like you'll be able to stick with?
I think what we need to do is meet the needs and find the money to accomplish that goal. So that's my direction.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jerry, are there concerns, or Chris, understanding we have the revenue purpose statement vote on March 3rd, what does a potential approval on that date provide for us, given this concern of what we were expecting and some of these escalated costs?
So right now, our revenue purpose statement provides authority for funding out through 2029, so we're down to 9 years, which means that we only have access to 9 years of bonding. Should the revenue purpose statement pass, it goes out to 2051, which then we can bond out over 20 years. 20 years is the max you can bond over. But what that does is it means that we can have more money up front and pay it out over a longer period of time. If you think about trying to pay, say, $1 million loan off over 2 years versus 5 years, you can see how much difference that is per year. And so that's what it gains us.
One question, just for clarification, Jerry. For this project, though, for Mitchell, how much of the funds of that $5 million from the bond is planned to be used for the Mitchell remodel?
I allocated, based on square footage for each of the addition, I distributed the funding from the bond for each of those 3 projects.
So it looks like it's only like 2.1 million?
Only?
Of the 5.
JD, could you scroll?
Yes, that's right.
So we're still going to have money available for the other 2 from the bonding?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
Any other questions or comments on the Mitchell Elementary additions and remodel? All right, it was moved by Bierbaum, seconded by Bankin. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Item E, modified allowable growth request.
I move the board authorize the administration to request from the School Budget Review Committee modified allowable growth in the amount of approximately $2,423.04 for special education administration costs at the Woodward Academy Day School Consortium.
Second.
Moved by Shields Cook, seconded by Perez. Discussion? Chris, do you want to give it a sentence to describe this? Because I would imagine that sentence will be able to describe the next action.
Yes,
item.
it might be a little bit longer than a sentence. Under special education law, Iowa schools are allowed to form consortiums, and when we do that, when we send students to those consortiums, they stay our students. They're not tuition to another school district. It's our program. We're a member of that. Woodward, because it's a standalone special education, gets administration costs for special education, which we normally don't get under special education. And so we are applying for our portion of the administrative costs for modified allowable growth because we pay that and we want to make sure it's not coming out of our spending authority.
Thank you. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Item F.
I move the board authorize the administration to request from the School Budget Review Committee modified allowable growth in the amount of approximately $5,270.79 for special education administration costs at the Grandwood Program Consortium.
Second.
Moved by Shields Cook, seconded by Perez. Discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Policies for action.
I move the board approve the policies as presented.
Second.
Moved by Bankin, seconded by Bierbaum. Discussion?
I just wanted to say I thought it was kind of fun that miniature horses were still in there as long as they were housebroken.
Any other discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Items from the board.
I just want to take a minute to wish our staff, our teachers, my fellow board members, Happy New Year. And here we go again. Feliz Año Nuevo y próspero y feliz Año Nuevo para todos. Gracias.
One thing that I will mention, I did get an opportunity to go see the earth science presentations from the 9th grade students at the library tonight that Mr. Kollin Reichard invited us. I'm always blown away by our students. They are just always impressive, and in the things that they were able to, that they presented, the research they did, their ability to answer my questions. And so I just really appreciate when staff allows us that opportunity to see their work in action. So, items from the superintendent.
We had the work session, or several work sessions, I think, where we were in the process of developing the district goals that go along with the priorities. And so after working with the board, working with the administration, collecting feedback, and then going back to the drawing board again, this is the set of district goals that we will be working from. And just to give you a little bit of an idea in terms of kind of what changes were made and where we go from here. Based on the board's feedback, some of the changes that were made were in terms of the statement of increase. Feedback from the board was we want to make sure that it's very clear that we mean more than, and maybe even some of our community groups, that we mean more than just a percent or so we did go back to the language that was recommended for statistically significant increase, and that is reflective in both of the first two items, and then moving down for the dropout language, we went with the language that Dr. Hawkins spoke about today, and I think some of the board members also reflected on in their notes, and so we are using the term push out or pull out. And then the other change came in relation to just splitting of two goals that were lumped together as one, and the feedback was around that. And I guess there was one other thing, cleaning up a little bit the language around the goal that had to do with the financial student-based funding process. So I cleaned that up, shortened that a little bit, and hopefully that's a little bit easier to understand. Where we go from here, I think, is the question that we've talked a lot about. And so we have had the administrators work, I think it was last Thursday, with their own building goals aligning to the district goals, and then setting their action steps with their benchmarking that goes along with that. At the same time, the district staff took the district goals and did the same process, defining what our action steps are and what the benchmarks are. And so from there, we will be giving reports, updates to the board on the district goals. The idea is that the district goals, as you remember, and we've talked about this before, but I'm just reminding you, the district goals are broad in nature, so that then the buildings can set their individual building goals in alignment with this in order to help us reach our overall district goal. And then as a district, we set our action steps on how we help support the work that's being done at the buildings with our students. And then in terms of our financial ones, what we do here and with the administrative staff, the district staff, and the building staff in our community. So any questions on that? I will be presenting you with the final actions, the district portion of those actions as well, but we're still kind of cleaning those up. So I'm excited to be where we're at and have the thoroughness that we've gone through. And hopefully then as we move into next year, it'll be much swifter, I think, in terms of we'll get our assessment scores back. We now have a process because of our equity audits on the data that we're collecting, how we're looking at that data. And so I think we'll be on better ground in terms of the data that we have available and the time frame that we are able to get that data.
Any other things?
That's it. I too went to that science presentations, and just the comment as I left, it was just our students are brilliant. They're just completely brilliant, and so it was a great event, and I always appreciate teachers taking time out of their own schedules to do that for us. So I know the time commitment is great, and appreciated that.
Our board planning calendar, if you take a peek at it, our next meeting will be January 27th, and we have a work session at...
Do you want me to go ahead? I see you looking. I didn't know if you were...
5:30.
Our board meeting will be at 5:30. Our work session will follow the board meeting, and the work session will be the presentation of the demography report for enrollment. And so then the following month, we will have the second presentation, which we we're not expecting until May, but very excited that we're going to get it in February. And that's more the capacity study of the enrollment, our programming, and what the capacity of our buildings are. And so one of the things I think to point out is that we continue to get questions about enrollment and what our plans are. And so I just want to reiterate, we're waiting for this study, and then we will be able to have some data in front of us to make long-range plans and look at what we'll do with the enrollment. So I know people are antsy to get answers, but we're really being methodical in how we look at this, how we look at our enrollment data, so we don't end up in a situation we don't want to be in, where we have buildings that are full and neighborhood students aren't able to get in, or vice versa. So just so you know and can answer questions in the public if those come up, we're really being mindful of getting this study and being able to have data that we use.
And maybe just to highlight date of interest, tomorrow's Jenny and staff will have Listen and Learn at noon.
Thank you.
I'm just reading off the charts.
I appreciate that.
Noon and 5:30 tomorrow
Right.
here in the district office.
Right, so-
the staff is shaking their heads, so.
They are,
they're
and
going
we've
to
been
be there.
planning it. So we will have a Listen and Learn at noon. These are the general Listen and Learns. So if you remember, we are going to be doing, one month we do a general Listen and Learn, and then the next month we do a deeper dive into an area that's been identified as having high interest. So this is the general session, and what we did was we used our new tool, Thought Exchange, and we put the question out there to our parents and community members and our staff to receive feedback on what the topics were that they wanted us to cover. So those are the items that we'll cover tomorrow. One of the lessons learned was just in terms of the Thought Exchange went out to both our community, our parents, and our staff, and we realized that they're different topics. So as we move forward, we'll survey our staff separate from our community, so we can provide maybe even Listen and Learn that's staff-based versus community and family-based. So tomorrow we're going to be covering the community parent, the items that rated at the top for that Thought Exchange, and so we'll do 2 sessions again, 12 and 5:30.
Great, thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Thank you so much.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Lankitis. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Thank you.
Appreciate you.